One of my favorite things to do on this channel is to take a popular narrative and simply just challenge it. Find whatever facts and data I can and see if the narrative is true. I mean, sometimes I do this and the narrative turns out to be dead on. Sometimes I do this and it's way off, and usually it's somewhere in the middle. So the narrative we're going to do today is free agent running backs. And has this been the return of the star running back? That is the question we will be asking in today's video. So I got some numbers to discuss it, and I'll mention right off the top, this might be a bit of a long-winded video with a little bit of explaining what some numbers are. I'll try to keep it as short and sweet as possible in that part so we can simply just get to our conclusion and talk about what it all means. But yeah, it's just fair warning ahead of time. But the three running backs I really want to talk about in today's video are the three I see getting talked about the most. And that is Derrick Henry, Jordan Love, and Josh Jacobs. Those three running backs. Now, there's other running backs like Aaron Jones and, Joe Mixon. But those are the main three I hear. So we're going to discuss the three teams that they went to and the three teams that lost them. So this is the chart we're going to be using in today's video. And we're going to be using only team stats, which is inherently a bit misleading, and we can fill in why that is ourselves, I think, right? There's obviously plenty of other variables, such as, the Giants didn't have Daniel Jones for most of last year. They had him for most of this season. The Titans have changed quarterbacks. The Packers have had a quarterback, now have a full season, and he did also miss a couple games too. That might be a factor. So a lot of other variables at play. Many people feel like Lamar Jackson has, played the best year of his career, right? So there's a ton of other variables. Even defensively, Ravens defense has gotten worse. Eagles defense has gotten better, right? Like a lot of different variables. But still, let's just get into it because I think it could be interesting. So first, we're just going to do the obvious. What's the difference between wins and losses, right? You see the difference. The reason why there's decimals is because obviously we haven't played a full season yet. So this is what you're on pace to be. For example, the Eagles are on pace to have 14.3 wins. They had 11 last year, so it's a plus 3.3. You see that the Eagles and Packers have been significantly better. The Ravens have actually dropped off, but that's mostly due to their defense. Their offense has actually been significantly better this year. And then the Giants, Titans, and Raiders all have had significant fall-offs. And this is why the narrative exists, right? While, of course, we're all sitting here and saying you can't just look at wins, losses. It takes more than that, right? Like, obviously it's going to be a bit more complex than just looking at wins and losses, but that tends to be how narratives form. So the fact that all the teams that lost their star running backs are worse, and 2 out of 3 teams that got the star running backs are better, and the Ravens' offense is better, that's why it's a narrative. So, okay, that's wins and losses. Well, what about just looking at the offense? That's what I'm going to do, and we're going to use 2 stats that, again, are going to take a bit of explaining. I'll try to say it as simply as possible, but EPA, which you might know what that is, EPA per play is a stat where it's essentially just how many points are added per play using an algorithm. Well, I then looked at teams' EPA per play, then looked at the average. I wanted to get more of a win total per season. I wanted to try to use wins for all of these stats. So I simply just added that to how many plays a team typically runs in a season, or up until this point in the season, and then figured out a total points added, and then use an algorithm to make the points added into wins added. And that is the number you're going to see. Again, a bit complex, but I do think it helps us out and gets a more accurate depiction of where we're at. So this is the wins added if you use EPA per play, and this is total offense, not just rushing. So the Eagles, nearly a full win. The Ravens are actually over 2 wins. That's the biggest jump in a positive direction. The Packers are positive, and the Giants are positive, which might be surprising, but keep in mind, like Daniel Jones, right, didn't have a bunch of Tommy DeVito games this year, so kind of makes sense. They did have a Tommy DeVito game this year, but less, right? So you have that. The Titans, who we've seen a massive drop-off from them, of course, it's safe to assume that it is not just the running back, although, hey, the Ravens have added multiple games, Titans have lost multiple games. You can make that narrative if you wanted. The Raiders also have dropped over a game using EPA. I also decided to do kind of the same thing, but just looking at points per drive, and then I extrapolated it to be a win total up until this point in the season. You see here, the numbers have actually changed because the Ravens do great in EPA, they don't do quite as good in overall points per drive. So because of that, they've still jumped up a bit, but it's only been 1.25. The Eagles and Packers both are kind of right around there. The Packers have actually seen the biggest jump in a positive way in this one, which is interesting because they were fourth best in the EPA one. So interesting there. Giants are still positive. Titans and Raiders are still negative. For some reason, I added an extra digit onto the Raiders. I don't know why I didn't round earlier, but that is where those teams are at. So, okay. Again, the narrative mostly works, right? If you want to say it's the return of the star running backs, all the offenses have gotten better by over a game in one stat, and at least gotten better to some degree in both stats. The Giants are kind of the fly in the ointment here as they have gotten better, but you could make the argument that that is simply just due to quarterback play, and then the Titans and Raiders both have gotten worse as, again, helps the narrative. So that's fascinating. But again, we're using the whole offense, and is that the best way to do it? I mean, it's running back. Shouldn't we just use the running game? Well, I kind of wanted to use both because obviously, running backs help out in the passing game, both with catching the ball and just being a threat to run, right? Play actions in theory work better when it's Saquon Barkley as opposed to, Kenneth Gainwell, with all due respect to Kenneth Gainwell. Well, I still decided let's throw on the rushing EPA, again, extrapolating it to a win total and seeing what it is. Well, if you look at it here, kind of a surprise, probably the biggest surprise on this list, the highest jump in a positive direction, no, that's not a typo, is the Giants' rushing attack. The Giants' rushing attack was actually one of the worst in football last year. It jumped up to one of the best. So what the hell happened? If you're wondering, well, didn't Saquon get banged up for a little bit? Yeah, a little bit, but he still had over 700 snaps last year, so it wasn't that. I think probably, simply put, is that A, the Giants have ran the ball well this year. They just have. B, the thing that we kind of have to talk about, which is a lot of times running backs get all the credit, but the offensive lineman does a lot of the work. Possibly they've just blocked better this year. And C is that I think this is what the pro running back people will say is that, well, yeah, it's easier to run the ball when you don't have Saquon Barkley sometimes because of the attention Saquon Barkley gets. A lot of times, Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs' value is in the play action game or is in the setting things up for the passing attack. But, it's interesting. Let's just go through the rest of the list. You do see that the Titans and Raiders did have a significant fall off in rush EPA. The Packers have actually been lower this year as well, which is fascinating. Ravens have been only slightly better. I mean, that's a jump, right? 0.16, but nothing crazy. And the Eagles have had a significant jump. They've been the second highest in a positive direction of 0.6, third highest overall jump, either positive or negative. So that's fascinating. I also figured just for fun, let's check the drop back EPA, how it works just for the quarterbacks. Again, this is extrapolating through all the data for what it would be this season in an average season. So if you threw the ball more, that's not a factor here. It's the same amount of snaps either way is what I'm giving each of these teams. So again, you see the Ravens have had just a massive jump of 1.87. Eagles have had a jump. Packers have had a jump. Giants have had a jump. Titans and Raiders have both gone down. And this is, I think, where we kind of have to almost end the discussion a little bit. Because if you got bored by all that, but I don't know, you turned on this video and then couldn't find a way to, didn't feel like changing it or whatever. Essentially, the numbers suggest that the difference you have in running the ball doesn't help you that much. I mean, the biggest jump was for a team that lost Saquon Barkley, and even with that, it's 3/4 of a win, which, listen, that's not nothing at all. I mean, you look at analytics, they suggest that the average team spends $30 million on a win. So, I mean, that would be totally worth a Saquon Barkley contract to get that jump. Like what Barkley has done for the Eagles just in the running game has been worth his contract and then some. But it's also nowhere near MVP level, right? I mean, the average MVP quarterback season is 5 wins added. Barkley maybe will get you a win, right? It's just a massive, massive jump there. But this is where the question comes in that it's really hard to answer, and I would even say is impossible to answer, which is how much value does a running back really have in the passing game. There have been numbers to suggest that if you run the ball effectively, it doesn't have any impact on the play action game whatsoever. Play actions, even in obvious passing situations, still work and still help. But at the same time, football is a strategic game, right? And there are times when, like the Vikings Cardinals game is a perfect example of this, where the Cardinals were running a specific coverage. The Vikings started running the ball to get the Cardinals out of that coverage and then attacked a different coverage and were able to pass the ball down the field, right? It is a play in your playbook that can sort of, help you out. Football is a strategic game, and being able to run the ball effectively helps you with that in a way that not running the ball can't. So what have we learned here? What is the take? Let's use the Ravens as an example. We've seen Lamar Jackson have a huge bump offensively this season. Is that because he has Derrick Henry? It's legitimately possible. Now, it's not like the Ravens play action game wasn't great before Henry got there. It's always been lethal, but maybe it's taken that next step. It's possible. It's also possible he just happens to be having a better season this year. I mean, that's also reasonable. My honest opinion, I think having a star running back does help you a good chunk when it comes to play actions and stuff. I just do. I feel like teams play different coverages. Like, we've seen the Titans essentially get every team they play into cover 3 zone when they were, with Derrick Henry and going through the conference championship game and stuff. I think it helps. I also think it's fair to say, running back is not the most important player in football. Obviously, the quarterback matters. Obviously, the offensive line does a lot to set up the running game. Because again, even when we talk about the Eagles adding 0.6 rush yards per EPA, how much of that is Jalen Hurts in his rushing? Like, some of it, right? So unfortunately, this is kind of a bit of a bummer of an ending, because the question is still a question. I mean, we don't know how valuable a star running back is. We know that the actual rushing ability is not season-changing. It can be game-changing, but it's not season-changing. Over the course of a year, it's not going to be a massive push just by a running back. That's not what's going to happen. We also know that we have seen games where it seems like the running back completely shifts games. I think my take on all this is that, I think all 3 of these contracts have worked. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley. I think they've all been effective contracts, and I think all those teams are happy that they made them. I also think the Giants, Titans, and Raiders probably should feel fine about not signing those guys, because when those 3 teams are competing, it'll be in 3 or 4 years when those guys are probably out of the league or just not the same guys anymore. So, I think it's really, I think all 6 of these teams probably played it right. I just don't think that running back is worth an MVP vote, in my opinion, unless you just don't like the fact that the award always is going to go to quarterback. If you want to make it most outstanding player, you can do that, but then the acronym would be MOP, and no one would like that, so that's why you can't do that. But if it was something like that, I wouldn't disagree with it. It's just, I don't think that a running back is really, again, most data I've looked at says a running back, even at their best, is worth about a win. That feels about right. That's still a $30 million player who gets paid $15 million, so it's still a good contract, but probably not MVP. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Adding a good player has helped the good teams. I think that's more news at 11. But those are my thoughts on all of it. What do you think? Hopefully this kind of bit of a jumbled video that I tried my best to make coherent video was something you found interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Always love hearing from ya. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.